What's up, Internet? We are here once again with 401 Real Game by CoolBoy, maybe, for the Famicom. And we are here to continue off on page 5, was it? 4? Something. And we're going to continue off with Super X-Wing, which is probably nowhere near as cool as TIE Fighter, but a man can dream. This looks like a completely legit title screen. Okay, so for a game about an X-Wing, we're actually playing as a TIE Interceptor. That's a good start. This is... I want to say this is a game called... what was it? Space Fighter Argus or something like that? I think this is that game, but they've changed the sprites, obviously. I do quite like that shadow in the water, and it's continuous with the actual TIE Interceptor sprite, so, you know, at least the hackers put in some effort, other than just making that crazy, awesome title screen. I'm not super familiar with this game, but apparently it's very Xevious meets sort of Twin Bee-ish, although I ran into that, and it's... like, how was I to know that was there? That was really awkward. Also, what's with that disappearing shadow sprite on the ground? Weird. This actually, judging by how it kind of scrolls indefinitely to the sides, it actually reminds me of another shmup on the Famicom called B-Wings, which was a pretty decent game. I mean, it wasn't great, it was a Data East game, but it was pretty okay. Aw. Game over. Can I try again? We're gonna try again. Also, once again, just marvel at what appears to be Serial K97, ROM Hacker Z 1997, Super X-Wing 97, arrow sign. Press start. Did that even say start? It might have said strat. But, you know, this isn't a bad shmup. I mean, it helps if you have a turbo controller like I'm playing with here because I don't have a proper NES controller, but... you know, it's not bad. It's certainly playable. That said, I've played much better games that are very similar to this. I've played, what was it? Super Xevious, which was basically Xevious 2.0, essentially, and... you know, it was great. Ironically, I got that game because I thought it was a completely different game. I thought it was Super Star Soldier, which is what I was trying to get, but while being both confused, I was also very impressed at Super Xevious. Then there's also the regular Xevious, there's Twin Bee. If you're playing the Famicom, anyway, the NES never got proper Twin Bee. We got, what was it, Stinger, which was Twin Bee played sideways, kind of. But let's move on to the next one, where we move on to Baltron. A long, long time ago, Star Wars was a thing. Actually, this reminds me a lot of... I wish I could think of the name. It was an olden television game where you basically flew around like this and blew up stuff on the ground. It's also very reminiscent of Defender, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if I should run into that bubble or not. It seemed like a hostile bubble. I did not enjoy that bubble's hostility towards me. But you know, following up one not terribly bad shooter with another not terribly bad shooter does not hurt my feelings, because, I mean, I'm bad at shooters, so it'll be hard to not die and keep this going, but at the very least... okay, it says warp. Is there a way to trigger said warp? By doing that, I evidently triggered a warp. Okay. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but... whoa, moving too fast. Let's slow that one down a little bit. Interesting. So it's still basically Defender, but without the whole trying to save people aspect, it looks like. Which, that's not necessarily a bad concept. There's a few games that were kind of like that. There was like Defender 2. There was, what was it, Drop Zone. There was another game that came out only in Europe that was basically Defender 3, if I recall. I think that was also on the, not Famicom, but the NES. Or it might have been a Game Boy exclusive, I can't quite remember. But I remember seeing it on a multi-cart a long time ago. I'll have to try and figure out what that was. People on the other side of the pond, tell me what that game was. Save me some time. Now we're getting some, like, salamander-style stuff. Whoa! And here's where things get scary, because you can't come into contact with the walls, I'm betting. Which means we gotta play things real safe. Which this game is not letting me do. Probably because I'm terrible at this, but also because things are really, really, really fond of just running straight at you. And when you don't have a wide area to move around in, it's actually really hard. Like here it's not too bad because I can go all the way up here, I can go all the way down there. Lots of room to maneuver, but once you start getting to like really tight confined spaces and you just cram enemies down small corridors, it gets tough. Especially when enemies don't necessarily have to follow the exact same rules that you do, such as they could probably go through walls while you can't. You know? It's tough. That's what makes it such an interesting game. Like, shmups in general, they're difficult, but they're arcadey, they're supposed to be. And it's that whole thrill of seeing the next level and getting a higher score that's what's supposed to drive you to continue playing them. And the fact that this game does, in fact, you know, have a progression, that definitely makes me want to play it more. Whoop. Whoop. But, aside from shooting paper airplanes and other weird nonsensical doodads, I can see this first level, if it just carries on long enough, to being really boring. And it's really up to that whole sort of progression to keep it interesting for you. I will try and fly into one of those bubbles. Okay, you can't fly into bubbles. Noted. But you know, this game's not too bad. It might not be great, but it's not too bad. And I mean, I'm not the biggest Defender fan, although I've heard that 3D Defender on like the GameCube is pretty good. I can turn around. Now let's turn around again. Please. I don't know how that happened. I mean, I'm doing the exact same thing I did before to turn around, but you're not letting me now. What's that thing? Game, answer questions for me. Or, you know, just explode. Whatever. Alright, next we have Mach Rider. Which is, of course, Mach Rider. You are Mach Rider. I find these leaning animations to be a little weird, because it like stretches your sprite a little. Whoop, whoop. But, you know, it's basically a Road Warrior game. Because, you know, you can drive, you can shoot. And I mean, you explode and then reform. That's kind of awesome. Well, that said, as someone who grew up with a Sega Master System, and I had a special one because, you know, the Sega Master System, you could play it even if it didn't have a game, because it had a game pre-installed. Everyone had Alex Kidd. I had Hang On. And I think Hang On is infinitely better than Alex Kidd. And as someone who grew up with Hang On, even though it was a terrible version that had, like, no sound, I'd still say Hang On would be better than this, too. But still, you know, it's not a horrible game or anything. It's a fun concept, and the combat aspect does make it genuinely different than, say, your Rad Racers or your, whatever Monaco GP type of games that existed on the Famicom and NES. I know I've got one of them. And you're like Ferrari Challenge or whatever it is. You know, when you really think about it, there was a lot of very similar racing games on the NES. But there was only one Mac Rider. I mean, yeah, it was presented very similarly, but at least there was a combat element to it, which, in its own way, made it almost sort of like a prototype for Road Rash, in its own weird way. And that, if nothing else, makes it quite a fascinating game. And I mean, I'm bad at it, but you know, it's... Oh. Design. Interesting. Okay, so... Okay, so... How do I... Ah, select, I think. Start, maybe? Oh, I have to hold the thing down. Okay. I want this thing in here. And that goes there. And I feel like that needs to go there. That needs to go there. Okay, now how do I leave? Select starts. A, B. I mean, where's the starting point? How do I design it? Does it have to be a perfect loop? It's nice that it sort of course corrects for the parts you can use. That's kind of interesting, but I do not understand the UI to this at all. Still, there weren't a lot of games that let you design your own courses back in the day. I mean, there was, of course, quite famously, Excitebike. And then there was, like, Nuts and Milk, and I think that was about it. Oh, no, I want that, and then 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 I want that, and there. That'll be our course. What? No. That's not what I want, game! You're being too obtuse. So next we have Onyanko Town, which I want to say is kind of like a differently existing Famicom knockoff of a Game Boy and LED game, or LCD game called Hyanko Alien, I believe. That was a game where you ran around a town digging holes for aliens to fall into and then burying them. In this one, you're a cat running around from dogs trying to get them to run into, like, manholes. Like that, I think. And you know, Hyanko Alien isn't a bad game. This is probably just a more colorful version of it, although I will say that you are constantly moving forward unless you happen to be, like, walking into a wall, which is a little awkward. Whoa! Let's not get hit by cars. So will the dog take the trap? No. Well, this is a problem. Oh! Oh. Poor Mrs. Kitty. She's just looking for her other little kitty. She even has her face on her house. That's kind of nice. Okay. Hooray. So... I'm not seeing any more enemies spawning. There we go. Oh, no, you want to come this way, Mr. Dog. And you want to run into there. Because you're a smart Mr. Dog who runs into manhole covers. Or coverless manholes, rather. Whoop! This is a little bit different from Yonko Alien because unlike that game where you could dig a hole anywhere, this is the kind of game where you can only activate certain manholes. Oh. So it requires a little bit more strategy, whereas the other one, it was more about just sort of baiting the enemies into certain spots. This one is more like, okay, I can only use these certain spots, and I can only use certain spots as exits and entrances. Therefore, I have to plan my route and take out my opponent accordingly. It's a lot more strategic. Also, that car is driving through houses. Magic car. That's the only explanation. There's the kitty. I want to save the kitty. Where are you, little... Oh, this thing does not scroll indefinitely. That's interesting. Okay, well, I saw the little kitty running around over here. Oh. Poor mama kitty. Let's try one more time. So I guess we have to try and get the cat as well. It's not just a matter of taking out your opponents. It makes sense, I guess, but it also means that enemies spawn indefinitely, theoretically. Okay. I mean, I can work with that, but... It looks like that little cat that we're hunting kind of, moves randomly, because it was on the other side of the world last I checked, because he was running around on the street. And because the world does not actually scroll around indefinitely like I thought it did, it means that he somehow Pac-Man'd around the entire world onto the street on the other side of the map. I don't know what that thing is, but I want it. It looks like a dress. Bonus point dress. So this is interesting. This also means that we have to constantly keep moving because we're searching for something too. It's basically cat and mouse, but with cats and dogs. What is this? Is this a doghouse? I think that was a person with an axe? Maybe? Okay, Mrs. Kitty Cat. Let's go over here. Maybe let's not go over here. Where is the little kitty? Also, seriously, what is this? Okay, I think I know what that is. So, that's a sort of like pet owner type character. We run into him and he'll start chasing us down, but he'll also indiscriminately chase after the dogs, I think. I'm not gonna lie though, that little sprite over top of his house looks like a helicopter. Run! It's someone with an axe, which is kind of horrifying. He's also able to phase to the other side of the world, which is terrifying for a lot of reasons. Oh god. I really wanted to see what that guy would do if he ran into a dog. Oh well. And finally we have Gyromite, which is Robot Gyro, which I don't even think I can play, because I'm pretty sure we actually need 2 controllers. This was all of 2 games. This was one of all of 2 games that used Rob the Robot. Although you could play it with a second controller, but, I mean, the whole point was that you used Rob the Robot. I don't have Rob the Robot. And also, I think this would only work on a CRT, so it wouldn't do me much good. For the exact same reason why you can't play a light gun game on here. Because the screen will still flash, but it doesn't flash at the right frequency, I think. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, we could stare at that for about 5 minutes, but I don't see the point. Anyway, that has been this past 5. Super X-Wing. decent fighting game, or rather, decent hack of a fighting game, although it's not true to its own name. Baltron, not bad. I think that's a game you gotta spend a little bit more time with, but not bad. Mach Rider, decent. Onyanko Town, I could see myself playing that for a lot longer, actually. That was a fun game. But Gyromite is basically worthless in this day and age. In fact, the only value a Gyromite card has nowadays is that it's one of a very few numbers of NES carts that contained basically an adapter for a Famicom card inside of it, because early Famicom or early NES games actually contained a Famicom adapter inside them. And you could basically saw off half your Gyromite cart, take out the Famicom board from it, and you could basically just use that for your Famicom games on an NES. Or you could just go spend $30 for a Famicom NES adapter like I did. But either way, this game is completely worthless. But 4 of these games were decent, and Onyanko Town and Mach Rider were pretty damn solid. So I'm going to say it was a pretty good past 5. So these 5, so far I'm happy with this multi-card, or at least these past 5 have made me happier with it. Anyway, come back next time when we tackle Truck Rally. But until then, peace out, Internet.